Ready to begin? I have a whole handful of questions. Looks like maybe about 15 of them. The first 5 that I have in front of me are all related to education. So I'll try to kind of group them here in some kind of order so that it makes sense. We'll start out with a question about Proposition 204. Prop 204 requires a 1% increase to state sales tax if passed. Do you support this effort by the citizens? And this is a question for both of you. And Tom, let's start with you.
All right, thank you. I support Prop 204, but reluctantly. First, there is a portion of Prop 204 that is missing, and that's our community colleges. It covers universities, it covers K through 12. It sets aside some money for child care, restoration of kids care, and then the vast amount of money that would be generated would amount to be about $600 per child K through 12. And I agree with that appropriation. I do believe that a sales tax is regressive, and it's unfortunate. And Arizona has a very, very high sales tax rate. And when you couple the sales tax rate with local rates, then bed, board, and booze, it becomes, I think, a burden. I introduced year after year, never got a hearing, a bill that would sunset every tax exemption in the sales tax code. Those exemptions amount to $11 billion. As Mr. Crandall stated, our whole general fund is $8. So as an example, you will pay a sales tax on a car, but not on a golf cart. Golf cart is exempted. My bill would sunset every new tax exemption or loophole. Every 7 years, it must be reviewed and eliminate 2/3 of them. 1/3 would lower the overall tax rate. You broaden the base, the rate can come down. And secondly, 1/3 would go to education to achieve specific goals, lower tuition and smaller class size.
Thank you. It's a very good question, and I'm opposed to Prop 204 for the reasons. We passed a proposition called 301 back in the early 2000s that was supposed to lead to better education, more money into the classroom for the teachers, and tie it to performance so that we got better scores. Today, statistics tell us that we have no more money going into the classroom because of local decisions. It's still at about 55% going into the classroom. Our scores are not any better. We still have 1 in 4 that is reading at grade level, and so it hasn't improved. What Prop 204 does is tie the state legislature's hand. I just told you a few minutes ago that we only have access to $8 billion out of the general, considered to be the general fund. $27 billion is being spent in the state. What this will do is take another $1 billion and take it out of the appropriation hands of the state legislature, where we have no control. Prop 204 says, and it will affect everybody, including all of the services that Mr. Chabon was talking about. It says if the sales tax drops, the revenue drops, it has to be picked up by the general fund. This is mandated by 204, which cannot be changed by the state legislature. The second thing that it does is says that you have to fund inflation every single year, and it has to come out of the general fund if the tax collection doesn't meet. So what we're doing is impacting the general fund again, which is only 1/3 of all of the expenditures out of the state, and it takes away the ability of the state legislature to do its job, which is in the Constitution, that we appropriate the funding for the state of Arizona. So it sounds good, but throwing money without some guidelines of where it needs to go and how it's going to be used is not a good practice.
The next one still relates to Prop 204, and then I'm going to take the liberty here of combining a couple. If Prop 204 does not pass, what should the legislature do to adequately fund education? In other words, how would you change the funding for education? How would you fund education
I suppose
if it doesn't pass?
I'm first on this one.
Go for it.
I think what we have is we have a situation where we have a very antiquated formula for funding education. And it's based on seat time, 4 hours a day in the seat. You got to go out and round up the kids and make sure they stay in the seat for 4 hours a day in order to get that funding. We have convoluted this by setting up a charter school system, by setting up other types of systems that has not kept up with that. For example, charter schools get funded less than what the public schools get. Well, let me back up. They get funded more on a per pupil basis, but they don't get the ability to have facilities. And so we have a very convoluted system. What we need to do is we need to take a look at how we fund education and see where all the money is being wasted. I'll give you a key example. If you belong to a JTED, your JTED, if it's taught at the high school, generates a 1.25 for the students there. If they go to a central program, that student then can generate a 1.50. And so there's a lot of things that we need to take a look at in fixing the funding formula and to find out where the loopholes are before we start saying we're going to do a 1 cent sales tax and throw more money into it. A very complicated system. It's been there since 1980. We need to take a look at that, and we need to look at how we actually hold districts accountable for the money that we're already giving them.
The reason why Proposition 204 is viable is that our classrooms are underfunded, period. 204 begins a process by which we restore funding back to the classrooms K through 12. Now, you may not trust that the money will be spent for accountability, get to the kids. Well, that's why we have school boards. That's why you elect them. That's why they hire a superintendent and hire teachers. That's why. A good editorial to read was from the Flagstaff Daily Sun. It said, "I hate 204, but I do not trust this conservative legislature to adequately fund education." In the 50 states, classroom funding, we are funded dead last. So when I hear Mr. Crandall talk about this, and talk about what there is waste and whatever there funding formulas, what really he is talking about is shifting chairs on a sinking ship. When we must be honest with ourselves and be focused on our kids and say that fundamentally our K through 12 system is underfunded. My answer to what would I do if 204 fails, I gave it to you in the last answer to the question. Tax reform, sunset tax loopholes, lower the overall sales tax rate, mandate the funding, the new revenue that would be realized to reach specific goals. When a classroom reaches 25, it shall be split. And other goals.
2 more questions on education. Now, these are a little more specific, kind of going back to words that were said earlier. First one, being a business manager and school superintendent, we have watched funds cut by legislature in capital and maintenance and operations. We were only given 2% in transportation. Please explain how you say that the 2% was given across the board. This goes back to what was talked about earlier. Tom first?
Well, I believe this had to do with, again, the convoluted situation we have in funding schools. Schools are funded based upon the number of special ed education students that I have. They are weighted more heavily. There are children who just, as Mr. Crandall would refer to it as seat time, it's a per capita funding. There is funding with respect to transportation. There's what is referred to as soft capital, which this year the legislature allowed local school districts to transfer that money to maintenance and operations. I shared a program the other day with Jim Ledbetter, the president of the school board here locally. The reduction in state funding has meant this to Mingus Union School District, that every cent that you pay as taxpayers here locally goes to the teachers in the classrooms and operations and maintenance. The state funding just kind of takes care of the buildings, the lights, and the foundation. So the cuts that they've realized here locally, the larger classrooms, the reductions in teachers, they simply do not replace a teacher when they retire or they leave. They eliminate the position. And as a result, class sizes grow. Is a direct result of state cuts. There's no partnership here. I think we ought to work to hold the legislature accountable for local school funding. I hear a lot about this accountability back, but the reason why 204 is viable, people want the legislature to be accountable.
Thank you. I think the thing that we need to look at, and Mr. Chabin is referring to this little book right here that says right now the Arizona expends $6,448 compared to the rest of the United States, and we set at number 50. But what they don't take into account is the amount of capital that we put in there, the amount of buildings that, through a lawsuit, requires the state to pay for all the building construction to make sure that every school district is equal in the amount of classroom space that they have, and it's upgraded to where it needs to be. When you add all of that in, we expend about $9,000 per student. When you add all of those other funds in, that's what it comes to. If you look at that, it puts us up there about 39th, which is up there with Kansas. Okay, when you add all the total funding, this is a comparison of M&O funding only, and it depends on when you use these comparisons whether you are contributing partially from local funding or if you're contributing state funding only. Let me give you an example out of what this is saying right here. In Arizona puts in 52.4% of this amount out of the state. The rest comes from local funding. New York puts in 49%. Now, when you compare student funding, you go to New York and they spend $17,500 per student. Who picks up the rest of the tab? It's the local taxpayer. And as you go down through, that's exactly how that works. Okay, so we have to be careful as to how much the state wants to pick up. Now, you do have some states that pick up the whole amount. For example, if you look at Illinois, they're number 50. They only put 19.4%. The state only puts 19.4% into that education funding. Who picks up the rest? So it depends on how your Constitution is set up as to who does what part, and it goes back to that funding formula that I was talking about. If we want the state to pick up the whole thing, then we can work at a different way to do that, and there are states that actually do that.
May I respond?
1 minute.
1 minute. Mr. Crandall, you stated that the state contribution through facilities would raise the per capita spending for our students up to $9,000.
If you look at the Goldwater Institute, where they combined all of the capital expenditures, building expenditures, and the government funding that we get from the federal government through the governor's office and through grants and so on, would put it up to $9,200 per student.
Well, that isn't state dollars. And that does not equal $3 billion. We have 1 million children K through 12. Right now, we're spending $6,000 per kid. We did not fund facilities for the last 4 years until this year, and it was only a marginal amount. This is a reflection of state contribution to the classroom, and we are dead last.
This is the expenditures, if I may respond.
Go ahead,
This
1
is the
minute.
expenditures that the state and the local are putting in to this amount. This is the total expenditure of the M&O budget compared so that it's equal across the board. They had to equalize it out. What they did not take into account any of the school facilities money that was there. And you say, yeah, we haven't funded it, but yet we are still doing debt service on lease purchases that we have put in there that has to be accounted for because it comes out of the general fund every single year, and we have to pay it. And so it has to be added in as part of that expenditure because it is still happening.
Mr. Crandall, apples to apples, apples to apples. Public school expenditure per pupil. Arizona, out of 50 states, is ranked 51st.
In the M&O funding, that is the equalizer. That is the equalizer in M&O funding, maintenance and effort, maintenance and operation funding. That is the equalizer. And if you want to put it that way, that is exactly right. But if you add in the total, we're spending about $9,000 per student.
Okay,
All right.
I think we do need to move on.
All right.
We do have one
It's
more.
good to have it. We are friends, by the way.
It was very interesting. Now, there is one more question, so you'll probably have another shot at this business of funding. What is the best ideal relationship for the state legislature to have with school districts regarding funding, local control, and unfunded mandates in terms of budget surplus as well as deficits? Does that make sense?
Well, without a doubt, the legislature should be a partner. And I'll say that again and again. The best way to gauge a partnership is to ask both sides, have you been a partner? Well, ask your local school boards whether or not we've been there. And we haven't. The majority has just had a tin ear and wants to argue about the things that Mr. Crandall wants to talk about, when in reality, buildings don't teach kids. Facilities don't teach kids. Teachers do. That's maintenance and operation, and we are dead last. So in terms of eliminating unnecessary rules and regulations that forces a lot of energy and money for school districts in terms of compliance, Mr. Crandall and I would be in absolute agreement. We had a bill regarding this issue and the universities where they cited legislative mandates for 40-some reports that they had to produce annually because of legislative mandates. We eliminated them. And that was clearly bipartisan. No problem. As soon as we have a list, either proposed by the majority in the legislature of what that list would be of state statutory mandates that could be eliminated to streamline the process of your local school to operate, I haven't seen a list developed yet, even though we hear time and time again for its need. I mean it. I have not seen a K through 12 list.
Chester.
Thank you. You're exactly right. There is way too much regulation. I'm a firm believer in local control, that school districts elect a school board and they should be making the rules and the regulations and so on for that school. However, in the Constitution it says that the State Board of Education shall set the standard by which students shall be measured. And so what I did last year, I made a proposal, and it was a bipartisan proposal, came out of the House, that basically said a pilot program where any district, up to 10 districts, could volunteer to be a part of the program. You would get a $200 increase in student funding. and you would be paid when those students met the outcome that was set by the state board. When they met that outcome, those students could move to the next level. You would be paid for those students, and they could start on the next level of instruction for that next. If they met 2 years of improvement in that year, you got paid twice, and that would help get where you needed to be. But the good thing about it, and I think every district would love, is Title 15, which is a book about that thick that dictates what's happening to all the school districts, would go away. The only thing that would be left in there is you would have to have policy to protect the teachers and to protect the students. Everything else, and what would allow you to go ahead and generate your federal funding. The rest of it would go away. It would be yours. You would be judged solely on your students reaching the outcome. To me, that is the best fit for all school districts because it gives you the local control to figure out how is best to get where you need to be. No more 4-hour seat time, no more of this. It's your policy, your way of getting there. When you get there, you get paid.
Thank you. Now I've been counting the cards and looking at the clock, and I think we'll go back to the 1 minute. Because what you have next is a potpourri of questions. A couple of them are like yes and no type things, so it may go faster. So we'll give the timekeeper the 1 minute instruction. Okay, here's the first one. And each one of these is different, so you're going to get a variety.
Okay.
Do you promise not to increase our state debt?
Most definitely.
Well, we can't. Oh, the state debt. Yes, I'm with you on that.
We spend over $1 billion a year just in debt service. We need to get it paid off. We need to get back to where we need to, so we're not spending that kind of money that could be used in education.
And we should quit borrowing money to build private prisons.
No clapping. Do you support Proposition 115, judicial selection, which would make significant changes to the merit selection of judges for the Arizona Supreme Court and judges in Maricopa, Pena, and Pinal counties? Do you support? Okay, Tom first.
No, it politicizes judicial appointments.
And I'm on the other side of that. I think what the governor's been asking for, that she have a selection of more people sent to her rather than 3 to be able to select from and do a better selection. So, depending on how you want to look at it.
This is a yes or no question. Is the border with Mexico secure?
No.
No.
That was good. We're moving along, aren't we? What role do you think the state legislature, okay, hold on now. Okay. What role do you think the state legislature should play in the regulation of abortion and women's reproductive health needs?
This isn't a quick one. This is a very sensitive issue. I was born and raised Catholic. I have 5 brothers and a sister. And I believe in the teachings of my faith. But in the United States, we have certain liberties to make certain choices in life without government interference and in privacy. I think we should remember that Peggy Goldwater, the late senator's wife, co-founded Planned Parenthood 60 years ago. And this effort in this legislature to interfere with health decisions involving women, Barry Goldwater's rolling over in his grave.
Chester.
To me, it comes down to a simple definition of when does life begin. If life begins at conception, then any abortion, in my opinion, is wrong and should be held accountable to that point. We hold murderers accountable all the time. And so it's a definition, and I think that's something that's going to have to be decided at some point in time. If life begins at conception, then it's the same as any other crime that we do on what we can see as living people. So I think anything that the state has done, I have not sponsored any of those, but I have voted for them, to protect unborn life is essential and important for the morality of this country.
Thank you. What do you think of the current medical marijuana law in Arizona, and would you be open to legislation to legalize, regulate, and tax marijuana in Arizona?
I kind of got hit by something Mr. Crandall was not responsible for in a hit piece. We have our own campaign money, but we were talking earlier, there's other money going out there. The people of Arizona voted for medical marijuana. You know, let's leave it at that. My wife died as a result of her first treatment of chemotherapy. Her vital organs shut down. And I see someone, whether they're at NAU, as a teacher or as a student, if it's a woman and the wig doesn't fit, or they got something wrapped around their head, or they're bald, if they think they need medical marijuana, I vote with them. With respect to legalizing marijuana, I think that is in the distant future. I think that's up to the voters. And if the folks want to put something on the ballot, they can get the signatures to get it done. I just don't think we're quite there yet. I think it'll happen in time.
You know, Mr. Chapin and I have gone around and around and talking about some other issues on a couple of different things. And the federal government's role and the supremacy clause, and if they pass a law, then how can a state have the ability to pass another law? And to me, use of marijuana in any form, according to the federal government, is illegal. And so when the state, through initiative measure, passes the legalization of medical marijuana, it's still the use, whether it's medical or whatever it is, it still goes against the federal law that has been stated. So if we obey the law, then it should be outlawed in the state of Arizona.
This one's for Mr. Crandall. Your opening remarks included a remark, quote, protect our Arizona environment for children, unquote. How would you accomplish this?
Well, I think this is one of the things that I put on the ballot and worked very hard to have you get an opportunity to vote on, and that's Proposition 120. And basically, there's a lot of money that is being tied up in not being able to utilize the resources that are tied up in all the federal land. 42% of this state is tied up in federal land, either through the Forest Service or through the BLM. We used to, when the logging was going on and we had access to those and we had a vibrant, very productive forest, our schools received what is called stumpage fees, and that helped in the education process. We no longer get those. And so with proposition that says, yeah, we're a sovereign state, we should have the ability to have a say in how those things are managed and be able to participate in the resources that it generates. Over $9 billion a year are generated for the federal level just on the mining royalties that are sent back to the federal government every year. That's in the 11 western states. Shouldn't Arizona be a part of that? Thank you.
Tom, you have a minute to read.
I think when we get to issues like Prop 120, we have to pause and say a prayer. Grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, and the courage to change the things that we can. Proposition 120 is precisely what I'm talking about, was talking about at the beginning. It is out and out unconstitutional. The state of Arizona cannot declare sovereignty over federal lands. It is a waste of our time. It is a wasted debate. What we can do with respect to our environment is tell the federal government that we don't want a nuclear waste dump site in Arizona and that we don't want uranium mining in the Grand Canyon. And we could do something to restore funding to our state parks.
May I respond very quickly?
1 minute.
You know, it's interesting that I hear all the time that it's against the Constitution, and I think what Mr. Chapin is referring to is the Enabling Act. Is that correct?
No, both.
The Enabling Act says that we disclaim everything. There's nothing in the United States Constitution that says that the federal government should own any land. In fact, in Section 8 of the Constitution, it says that they are limited to forts, magazines, and other property that is given to them by the state legislature. I don't see where the state legislature, only in the Enabling Act, that gave that authority to those. An interesting thing about the Enabling Act, it also says in there that we should not allow alcohol on the reservation. We should not sell it. We should not barter it and whatever. But a proposition for this state has given Indian gaming, and they are selling liquor on those reservations. So if we're going to talk about unconstitutional, then we better go back and get our federal delegation to take a look at and amend our Enabling Act to do both, to use our forests and to take care of the Indian gaming.
Yeah.
One more time. That's it.
We have two other issues involving state trust lands. One, the land exchange, and the other is to reformulate gained interest on the sale. Both of those issues were negotiated with Congress, and the Enabling Act was amended so the state could do this. Mr. Crandall, no way in the world does any state have sovereign jurisdiction over federal land at its fundamental basis. It can't do that. That's why it's unconstitutional. And yes, you are absolutely right. It violates the Enabling Act. We are violating the conditions by which we became a state. For those two reasons, that's why the Arizona Republic called it unconstitutional and silly dribble.
May I respond?
Quick.
That's good. This is good.
I beg to differ that every state is not sovereign over its own land. If you want to take a look at a state that is sovereign over its land and doing very well, go to North Dakota. 3.3% unemployment. They are drilling oil. They are drilling for gas. They're doing all those things. They are sovereign over those states. That is one of the reasons that we have more oil production today than we've had in the past, because they don't have to answer to the federal government to drill on their private property and to mine and to get those resources that are now being paid for to the United States government that could be paid for here.
Okay. This is for both of you. Do you own a firearm?
No.
Yes.
My son does.
Okay. What is your position on the legislation HB 2828 that was passed last year requiring all local elections in Arizona to be held in even-numbered years?
That bill, oh, my first.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You're opening your mouth first.
That bill was opposed by every election official throughout the state of Arizona. It was opposed by the Arizona League of Cities and Towns. Your county recorder here in Yavapai County and your election official was absolutely against it. The bill was a Goldwater Institute bill that said that we are going to have one great big ballot in November. No special elections for school bonds, no different cycle for city elections. It was passed and it was signed into law. And I promise when I get to the Senate, I'm going to try to undo it.
Thank
Chester?
you. I did vote for the bill, and it does not prohibit special elections for bonding and so on. Municipalities, school boards still have the ability to do the special elections for bonding. But there was a huge outcry from my constituents in Old District 5 that says, yes, we want a one consolidated election so we don't have to worry about when we go to ballot, whether it's the city ballot, whether it's that. Yeah, there was some pushback on the cities and there was some pushback from the counties and so on, because you look at the special elections and things that they do to raise your taxes when they get there. Now that part was pulled out, but the cry came from the constituents that we want a one-time ballot in the fall with the general election.
Okay, what is the legislature's goal in producing legislation that invites legal challenges? That'll give you something to think about.
I'll answer that. I don't think our goal is to invite legal challenges. However, I think with the encroachment of the federal government and the things that we're happening, every law that we pass has to go through the muster of having a legal challenge. I don't think there's anything that we do down at the state legislature that is not declared unconstitutional, or is it constitutional, or will it be constitutional, depending on which agency from the federal government is going to determine that they think it's unconstitutional. So I'm not sure we ever get away from the legal challenges that we pass as the law, and I think that's part of the checks and balances that we get as we pass legislation. And I think it's all part of that checks and balances that the state has with the federal government to determine and to make sure we exercise our sovereign state rights to remain a free state.
Mr. Crandall represents the passions of the Arizona legislature. Fight the feds. Choose an issue, pick a fight, cost you tax dollars. Beyond that, how about going after the independent redistricting commission and impeaching her? Taking that all the way up to the Arizona Supreme Court and losing that battle. Not stopping there, but suing the state of Arizona in federal court over the redistricting commission, its role, and its maps. The first round cost you $6 million. To sue the independent redistricting commission and to defend it. And the money is piling up on those legal bills while we're in federal court. It isn't just suing the feds, it's the obsession to sue our own state agencies.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears here on you. I believe Arizona recently decided the Bible is a literary book for school children.
Yes.
Will the Quran and other books of other religions be included, or does this go against the separation of religion and government? Chester, you want to start?
Serving on the Education Committee, there was a tremendous amount of testimony that came through discussing that, and all over the world. And testimony came back from college professors, from various educational institutions that say that the Bible is the foundation of a lot of the literature that is being used in our legal system, that is being used in our educational system at the higher level, and has become a lot of acronyms, a lot of sayings, a lot of usage that is there, and that they determined that students who did not have access to those literary terms that are found in the Bible were excelling in the literary classes at a lower rate than those that did have it. And so I voted for that. I think it's very good legislation to be able to use that, to teach it as literacy, not as a religion.
I voted with him. I'll tell you why. This was a redundant bill. The Bible has been used in our classrooms as a book of literature before this bill ever passed. It was not necessary. But if you are part of a passion that wants to make something an issue that isn't an issue, Then you pass a bill again. And I'm telling you, what are we missing? What are we missing when we are swinging at these pitches that no one can hit? We're missing the fact that we're dead last in funding in your classrooms, in your local schools, because of the state's failure to do it. We're missing that the Department of Public Safety is being funding out of her funds, and our roads are not being plowed when it snows.
Okay, we'll move on to the state tax credit for donations to private schools. What is the process to eliminate it? Would you support elimination of this state tax credit?
I'm not sure that you know, the
STO?
yes, student tax organization or student tuition
This is
organization.
to
You know, one of the
private-
things that has been an outcry from at least those that I visited with is to be able to have choice. And this was one of the ways that was put in place to implement that choice. We've done a lot with our charter schools. We've done some other things to be able to do that, to give parents an opportunity to take their kids where they think where they're getting the best educational services that they feel like that they need. This is one way to do it. Is it the best way to do it? It came about because our state constitution prohibits the appropriating of any money to private institutions. I think there's other ways to do that, to give us choice. I am working on some of those ways to do that. But as I see right now, to give parents choice of what they need, this is the best thing we have.
The system we're talking about is student tuition organization tax credits. The problem in the system, I'm not completely against them. I'm against their abuses, and I'd like to see them curtailed. It would be nearly impossible to repeal it because it would take a 2/3 vote of the legislature. That's why the tax reform plan that I'm offering would be voter approved and would be mandated by the voters. This could end. The abuses involve one parent earmarking the child of another parent, trading their tax credits, attaching their tax credits in the form of scholarship, so it relieves their obligation to pay their tuition to a local school. Private schools, primarily parochial. The other abuse is the system where there is a CEO that is paid, that's on the board of directors. He is also the landlord and the attorney for the same STO, and he's making a salary from all of it, and he has a contract with it. It all totals over $500,000 a year to one person, and he happens to be a state senator writing these laws.
May I add a little more to it? I think Mr. Chapin and I are basically on the same thing. We need to, we are going to have to take a look at funding schools through tax credits and have school districts go out and figure out how to collect all those, or we're going to have to figure out how we're going to fund it through the state system. And I'm for one looking at how we can do that. But parents need to have choice. Parents need to have the ability to take their kids where they feel like they're getting the best education.
And if I could just follow, I am fundamentally, not that there wouldn't be an exception, I'm fundamentally against tax credits that takes funds away from your local public schools. That's what this STO system does, $55 million a year.
Next one. I like the idea of testing teachers and supplying us with better teachers that students respect and want to learn from. How do we make this happen?
Well, I don't think, you know, we talk a lot about teacher certification. We talk a lot about testing. We talk a lot about all those kind of things. I'm not sure that I totally agree that teacher certification and all of those kind of things makes a better teacher. Yeah, it gives them some experiences and some ideas and things, but the actual getting into the classroom and those teachers who actually love to teach and are willing to work with the students and do what they need to in order to make those students be successful is where it's at. We have unlevel playing fields in the state of Arizona with our charter school system and with our public school system, all based on competition. And I'm not sure you get a true competition when you have a set of rules for this group over here and a different set of rules for this group over here. If we want true competition, then everybody has to have the same rules, and everybody ought to be getting funded the same, so that they have to do a better job in the classroom. And with my proposal of the pilot program for 10 schools, and I will run that again, that creates that. Everybody's on the same playing field. We'll take charter schools, we'll take regular schools, put them so that we can do that competition and see where it's at.
I think the challenge of the question is you're asking the legislature to fire a bad teacher, and we can't. That is to your local school board. However, are there measurements by which the community and students and supervisors can fairly and accurately evaluate a teacher and performance? I think there is, and I think it's the Stanford 9, where if every child took the Stanford 9 for their grade level, they'll know where they rank, not only in their classroom and in their school and in the state, but they will know where they rank nationally. We should do away with the Ames test. It's a silly measure. And our teachers waste valuable classroom time preparing their kids for a test that academically and in terms of a real measure is meaningless.
Okay, I'm going to pick and choose here. We're getting down to the wire. What is your view on state insurance exchanges as required under the Affordable Health Care Act? Tom, you want to go first?
That is one of the issues that the state legislature will have to face in January. Whether or not the state will form an insurance exchange for businesses and individuals to buy health insurance or not. Now, if the state doesn't do it, the feds will. So the question for me as your senator will be to take a look at the two policies that will be offered to consumers. Will the state plan be better for consumers and for businesses, or should we just let the feds come in and take it over? I mean, we don't have an option in this. We have to make a choice. It's either the federal system or the federal plan or a state plan.
I'm against the exchanges for two reasons. Number one, I think it's a money maker for the insurance companies to be able to set that up. Every lobbyist that has contacted me that represent insurance companies are for the exchanges, and that tells me one thing, that they're going to make some money off of this somewhere along the line. The fact still remains, even if the state sets it up, they don't have control of it. I've gone through and studied this pretty intensely, and the fine print says that it's still under the control of the federal government. So if the federal government's going to control it, then let them go to the expense of paying to get it set up and not use state dollars to do it.
If Prop 121 passes, hope you know what it is, how do you see it affecting your activity as a legislator?
I don't think it's going to affect, because it won't go in until 2014, so it's not going to affect what I do at the state legislature there. It may determine whether I get elected again or not, depending on, how good a job I've done in the past. I think it is, you go to the top two primary, I think if you're looking to have term limits and whatever, you're going to have a system where your incumbents are going to be a whole lot more prone to be elected year after year after year. I'm not sure that it's going to get what the proponents of Prop 121 thinks it's going to get to.
How would it affect us? In light of the fact that this legislative district is a competitive district, a district that can go either Democrat or Republican, I don't think it'll make any difference for orientation that Prop 121 is the top two primary. The primary ballot everybody would get, no matter what party you are, and you would have the opportunity to vote for any candidate, Republican, Green, Libertarian, Democrat, everybody gets the same ballot. And for the general election, the top two would be on the ballot. And I believe the League is against it. I disagree with the League. I think a good example of why it's a good idea was the recall election of Russell Pierce, right there. You know, I think by having the top two, we have an opportunity for a candidate to reach to moderate voters.
Can you tell us how you will represent this diverse district? You have to drive a lot.
This is a large district. District 5 was the largest until District 6 came in, and so I had an opportunity of traveling from Holbrook, Arizona, Winslow, Arizona, all the way to Safford on several occasions in my last district. So, you know, the travel, I'm used to that. And living in Heber, there's not a whole lot of places around there. You know, one of the things I found as I've gone around and met with people in the various areas here in the Verde Valley and Flagstaff and others, they have the rural values at heart. And that's what I have, the values, the rural values at heart. Being raised in the country all my life, being around the forests, the agriculture, I have a love for that and have an idea of what we need to do in order to provide services for rural Arizona.
I think that, you know, for one thing, the Verde Valley and other cities the cities have formed the Greater Arizona Mayor's Council. They meet regularly. I know they would want to meet with either one of us elected. I would like to see us also form a group for school boards and community colleges. To tell you the truth, I really love the district, and I really love the Verde Valley. I was telling Chester, should I win this thing, I'm thinking about moving down here. It's warmer, and it's a whole lot closer to Phoenix. So, but we've got 9 cities and 4 counties. They're great people that represent you, and it's a pleasure to sit down and talk to them. It really is.
Okay, this will be the last question before closing. What do you talk about when you converse cordially with your opponent, particularly when political differences are extreme?
Oh.
I can tell you, Mr. Chapin and I get along very well. I'm up on the 3rd floor, and he visits up on the 3rd floor every once in a while as he goes to his office, and I have a jar of peanut M&Ms and a jar of nuts, and he comes in and sits down, and we carry on a conversation, and you know, we're good friends. We really are. We have a wide difference in our ideology, in what we think is important and things that we need to support, and we're elected by those people that support those same values and those ideas. And so we have to continue to do that. We have worked to middle ground. We have voted on some of the same bills. 90% of the legislation that was signed by the governor has been bipartisan. So it's not that we're not working together. All you get is what the media wants to promote because it's good news and it's a good fight. And they like to, I think, sometimes embellish that. But hey, we stood back there just when we came in and had a good conversation about the campaign and how much money was being spent by independent expenditures that he doesn't know anything about and I don't know anything about. So we have good conversations.
I echo that completely. Chester Crandall is a fine man. He's a good man. And you know, part of being in the legislature, I don't care. You got yourself elected there. You are a colleague. We want our kids to be healthy. We want them to be prosperous. We want each other to be healthy. We're there when there's tragedy. We're there when there's sickness. And honestly, we couldn't live with each other if we fought all the time. We truly reserve our differences on the floor, in committee, and in person. But when on the floor and in committee, we are governed by strict rules that it never gets personal, we stick to the issue, and we have a doggone good discussion.
We do.
Now, we will hear closing remarks from each candidate. This time we will go in reverse order, and each candidate has 1 minute to speak. The first will be Chester Crandall.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate all the people that have shown up. I think it's been great to have the questions that have been asked. I think they're very important questions, and whether you got them totally answered or whatever, I think Tom and I can afterwards and answer any questions you may have. I'm very passionate about the two areas that I have talked about. Education, number one, having spent 30 years in it, we need to fix our education system, and it doesn't always require adding a whole lot more money to it. We've got to fix some basic things in order to get that done. The other is that I feel that we need to have equal footing with every other state in the union, and we don't have that right now. And Prop 120 gives us the opportunity to start that process of getting equal footing that we've been left out with. Thank you.
First of all, our crowd has grown, so thanks to all of you who've shown an interest in this discussion tonight and for your participation. As I said at the outset, I believe that the issue is the legislature itself. I believe it has been swinging at issues we can't do anything about, take over national forests and the rest of it. Our children have been left out. The question for you is this: whether or not you agree with everything that Tom Chabin says or stands for. With your vote for Tom Chabin, you will vote for a more moderate and bipartisan Senate. Bottom line. I ask for your vote, and thank you very much for your attention.
Let's give them a hand. Let me add my thanks to you for your participation, and to you, the audience, for your attention and participation. If your question did not get asked, our speakers will be available to you at the close of the forum. So stick around and meet the candidates, and remember, Election Day is November 6th, so be sure to vote. Thank you very much.